Okay, good morning. My name is Victor, and I'm going to be your anchor for this Cisco CyberOps training. This is the Cisco CyberOps Cybersecurity Operations training. So it's a 28 module series. It's a training for Tier 1 SOC analysts. Okay, we've gone through up to module 21. In the last module, we looked at cryptography, and in this module, we're going to be talking about endpoint protection. So how do we protect our endpoints? How do we protect our end devices? So don't forget, we said you're going to have intermediary devices, you're going to have media, and you're going to have end devices. So you call this endpoint security. Explain how a malware analysis website generates a malware analysis report, right? These are some of the objectives we want to look at. They want to explain methods of mitigating malware, explain host-based intrusion prevention system and intrusion detection system log entries, and how a sandbox is used to analyze malware. In our digital forensic course, classic examples of software you could use to do this is using the FTK manager, or imager rather, or you use Pest Studio, or you use Sukuri, or use Virus Total. You could use all of these to do malware analysis. Anti-malware protection. So you want to guide against malicious, scamish threats you have within your network. So endpoints can be defined as hosts on the network that can access or be accessed by other hosts on the network. Each endpoint is potentially a way for malicious software to gain access to a network. Devices that remotely access networks through VPNs are also endpoints that could inject malware into the VPN network from a public network. So, anytime you hear the word endpoint, think about who is going to have access to or who is going to be accessed. Okay, so host malware protection. One way you could implement the security for your hosts, that is your PCs, your printers, your devices, your phones, and the rest, all of those devices and devices. One way you could protect them is by using mainstream antivirus, anti-malware softwares, right? One thing they do is that they detect all of these viruses and trojans and spywares and whatever using three ways: signature based, heuristic based, behavioral based system. So let me explain them one after the other. For signature based, now every malware, which we understand that malware is the umbrella word for all of those softwares that cause system malfunction, they have their signatures. That's to say that, don't forget, in the previous model we looked at threat intelligence. These malwares have been identified, they have been studied, they have been understood. So there's database for all of these stuffs and their signatures, right? So most of these anti-malware softwares, they pick uh, the characteristics and the signature of this malware, and they have the database for it. So anytime you update your application, anytime you update your software, what you do is that you download the signature, the anti for this particular malware. So when your antivirus or anti-malware solution, your anti-malware solution sees this particular virus, Trojan, spyware, whatever, it's able to recognize it based on its signature. Then the next one is heuristics. So just because of the way the malware acts, how it performs its operations, how it writes files to the system, the composition of the software. So that's what heuristic does. Then, of course, for behavior, employs analysis of suspicion. So anything that does not that anything that is an anomaly, any anomaly in the behavior of a file or traffic, right? So once that happens, it can flag that as a malware. So this is how this anti-malware solution, antivirus solutions they operate? Okay, so what's the behavior-based detection technique for anti-malware they do is that any anomaly in the behavior of the file or traffic, it flags it down. Same thing for host-based firewall. Most of us use a Windows Defender if you run a Windows system. So that's one way to guarantee endpoint protection. Of course, host-based security suites, depending on your software of choice, you could use some of them have features like antivirus, anti-phishing, safe browsing. A lot of antivirus suites have all of this. I know for ESET, it has an HIDS. It doesn't have a HIPS, but I'm very, very sure I've used its HIDS, right? Okay, so network-based malware protection. So intrusion prevention systems, network access control, gateway security, endpoint security. So these are ways that you can implement security within your network. And you have some, for instance, Cisco have the ESA, WSA, and okay, yes, they have this as a device. Cisco have this as a device, right? Well, you could use other vendors to implement network-based malware protection um for your network. For instance, network admission control. I use a device called Microtik. Microtik, you could use it to permit only authorized and complaint system to connect to the network. So this is a multi-step operation, multi-step deployment. You have next generation firewall, IPS, IDS, ESA, WSA. So this is a more or less a multi approach to protecting your host on the network. Host based, so you have firewall, IP tables for Linux, NF table for also Linux, then TCP wrappers for Linux. So these are the ways you could implement firewalls. So depending on your software of choice, make sure that you understand that one way to protect your endpoint is by implementing not just antivirus softwares but firewall. So firewalls are going to guide against traffic, protect the traffic entering into your network or entering to your computer. Then we've talked about HIDS. They protect hosts against unknown malware, right? That's the beauty about them. So a lot of them needs to also be updated so that their signature database is very, very, very compliant and fresh and new. Gathering intelligence from all of those sources we talked about, I think in module 20. Now, one thing you need to understand is that whether you're using a HIDS, a HIPS, an anti-malware, or a firewall, these are three ways you could implement a multi-step approach to protecting your endpoint. Understand that if you don't update them, if you don't keep them up to date, you're as good as not secured. Because if you don't have the anti for a latest trend, for a new and malware, for a new threat, there is no how you're going to be able to protect yourself. So whatever you are using, you want to make sure that you are as well very, very well updated. And HIDS, host intrusion detection system, there are different ways they could also do those detections. So it can be anomaly, I've explained that. It can be policy based. That's to say that you could write rules to your software or your hardware to tell it what to shut down, how to shut down, what traffic, what protocol, and whatever. So you more or less create a policy. So this policy normally will be drafted from your network policy document. So that is a wider approach to implementing security. So you're not just picking up the router or picking up the software and you just are ticking here and there, here and there. So it wants to be something that you already have a cybersecurity policy document, which one of which is a network policy document. So what and what do you allow on your network? What and what, who should have access to what? So from that you can now draw out a policy and implement on your HIDS. So there are different HIDS products. Like I said, it all depends on your choice for traffic, rather your choice for implementation. So Cisco AMP, Allen Volt TCM, Tripwire, open source HIDS security. Then there's so many in the market. So it depends on your choice of usage. Application security. So attack surface. So attack surface is the sum total of the vulnerabilities in a given system that is accessible to an attacker. So where and where do we have attack, or do we have interface with our attacker, right? Our IoT devices, our network devices, our cloud, our mobile, our global operation. That's people providing uh, traffic to our website, our BYOD policy, right? People are going to bring devices to the office. People are going to bring devices to our homes. People are going to bring devices to where we have critical access or critical data. Network attack surface, software attack surface, human, very important. Blacklisting and whitelisting. When should you blacklist? Should you whitelist? So anytime you hear the word whitelist apps, is that we're saying that these applications we can allow them, right? These applications we can allow them. Whereas if you blacklist, so we're saying these applications we are disallowing them, we are preventing them, right? So there are several things you can whitelist and blacklist. Things like IP address, things like MAC address, things like websites. You can disallow people to visit a website and several others. So one of the things that is making you do that is that you want to limit access to potential threats. Okay, so this is how this implementation can be done by the using the Cisco firewall security management system. System-based sandboxing. So sandboxing is a technique that allows suspicious files to be executed and analyzed in a safe environment. Cuckoo Sandbox is a popular free malware analysis system sandbox. It can be run locally and have malware samples submitted to it for analysis. Any run is online tool that offers the ability to upload a malware sample for analysis like any online sandbox. You have Pest Studio and several others. So the goal is that if you are going to be doing some tests, you don't want to test in a in a in an environment where you have your critical data. You want to be doing that in a sandbox. Sandbox is just like a playground, right? So that playground allows you to. So the sandbox is going to help you implement most of these things. If you virtualize, is another way you can also uh, implement a sandbox. Okay, so please watch the 6 minutes video that helps you better understand the sandbox, how you can use sandbox to launch malware. Now, running malware in a sandbox using virtual machines, that's one way. Running a network service simulator, that's another way. DNS redirector, that's one way. Process monitor to capture and filter events, that's one way. This process monitor is one of the sys internals tools. Process Explorer, that's also a sysinternal tool. Then taking before and after snapshot of a Windows registry using Wireshark to examine network traffic generated by malware. So so that's one way you can in a sandbox environment test most of these things and see how they operate. So please log on to your Cisco LMS and watch this 6 minutes video to see how all of this can be done. They are very hands-on, they're very practical. Okay, so I think that will be all for the Cisco Endpoint Protection training, our module 22. We're just about 6 steps away from concluding the training. Don't forget, endpoints are defined as hosts on the network that can access or be accessed. They are uh, internal LAN elements to secure, endpoint and network infrastructure. You have anti-malware, anti-virus softwares that can be installed on the host to detect and mitigate viruses and malware. You have host-based firewalls. Uh, Examples are Windows Defender, IP tables for Linux, NF table, and TCP wrapper. They have HIDS protects host against known and unknown malware. That's the beauty about it. So they use heuristics, they use anomaly based type of detection technique. So not necessarily a signature based type of detection. Okay, new words that you should have learned is antivirus, anti-malware, endpoint, host-based, sandboxing, HIDS, and of course attack surface. Attack surface meaning all the places where we can have, or all of the interface that we can be accessed from. It can be our network, it can be our phones, it can be our websites, it can be anywhere we communicate, we can have access, or the attacker can have access to us. Okay, that would be all. Thank you very much and see you in the next module.